Welcome to the JMark Business Innovation Technology Experience.
Hi everyone, this is Christina Coons with JMark. I'm here with Todd Nielsen, Tom Douglas, and Dax Bambro. We are going to talk a little bit about cyber attacks today, specifically the risk that small to medium-sized businesses face. And I forgot to say, this is the BITE Business Innovation Technology Experience. So let's start off with basically getting right to it. So Tom, what would you say to someone who says, I'm not a target, I'm just a small business in the American Midwest, that would never happen to me?
I guess the first thing I would say is wrong. All businesses are being attacked in today's world, and most of the time the attackers don't know who, where, or how necessarily a business could be compromised. They're attacking everyone, and it's a scanning system that scans anything and everything that's on the internet, and if they find a hole, then they start to drill down and double down on that in order to penetrate the business. So there's a massive amount of energy that's going into just finding any vulnerability, any exploit that they can find online. And the bad guys essentially are blind to who they're attacking until they find the vulnerability, and then they start to uncover a little information about them. So every business, every home, everything on the internet, to include a laptop at Starbucks, is under attack. What a lot of people don't know is that the bad guys, the hackers, if you will, they actually operate oftentimes out of the Middle East, oftentimes in areas that we can't go with the FBI or the CIA, or where we don't have an agreement with the country. But they're legitimate businesses. They come into work every day. They have an HR department. They have health insurance. They get paid. They do all of those things. And so those bad guys, I mean, it's not some guy drinking Mountain Dew in a basement anymore. It's real bad guys who are getting paid big money to find a way to penetrate any and every business that they can. And that includes a business of 2 or 3, 5 people, all the way up to businesses that have hundreds of thousands of employees.
I thought that was really shocking when I heard that they're full-on businesses just like we are. And I think it was Jeremy said this. Someone asked him when I was in the room, so if you actually pay the ransomware, what's to say they'll, give you your stuff back? And he was like, well, actually, then if they don't, they will lose credibility. And they are a real business, so they really do follow through. It's really interesting.
They do follow through, and they have a help desk, and they have a guarantee, and they help you to retrieve your data because, like you said, if their reputation is that every time that somebody pays the ransom, that they still lose their data, their whole business model starts to crumble, and they stop making money.
I think we need to, I've written a lot about this, and you've talked about this a ton, Tom. We've talked to so many people about this, and I still don't think that there is a clear picture about how someone could get hacked, because it's somebody else, it's happening to somebody else.
Right.
But I mean, every position in a company can open up the entire company to massive attack. What are some of the examples that you all have seen at companies that you wouldn't have never thought would have breached them?
The most common is still the phishing attack, the simple email, where they're getting better and better. They look legitimate. They either look like they're from somebody inside the organization, or from a vendor, or a Dropbox, or a UPS. I mean, they really do look legitimate. And when people click on them, the growing challenge and risk is that people are seeing more and more email from their phone. And so it's harder to tell if it's an internal or an external email. It's harder to tell if it's legitimate or not. So they click on something, they put their username and password in, and it's game on. The threat has risen a lot more in the last couple of years because people are are integrating the core network to Office 365 or to the G Suite from Google. And because it's the same username and password that people have in their email that they manage on their workstation or their server accounts, as it may be, once they get that password, they get the keys to the kingdom. It's
Yeah,
still the
and
number one way.
it's gone even a lot farther too. That, I mean, there are video files now that they
Yep.
figured out a way to embed malware in it. They've figured out how to embed malware in images. So
Mhm.
you could pull up a web page and it could do, you know, load something on you. There's malware that can be in the code on the back side of a web page. So you could just be browsing a website and bam, you're breached. And there's just, it is unlimited. There are just so many little ways that you can just screw yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They call them drive-by infections. You're literally browsing, and ironically, it's marketing departments that are one of the worst because they're always looking for fun images to put into their marketing. But it's the drive-by environment that can get you. So if you don't have the latest and greatest updates, you don't make sure that the vulnerabilities on your workstation have been mitigated, then that and the other one is social media. So one of the mean tricks that they play is they'll buy a social media ad from Facebook or whoever it is, and that has to go through an approval process where, you know, Facebook or whoever checks the code to make sure that everything's good. But once it makes it through that authorization process, they change the landing page on the backside. So even Instagram, I'm sure you've all seen those ads that they pop up and you swipe up to see more and it pulls up a whole new web page. Well, that goes through an initial approval process, but once it's approved, they can change the code on the back end. And there's been a couple of companies busted for doing it or individuals busted for doing it. So when you swipe up and you look at that ad, it can actually infect your phone even. And so you have to be really careful about the drive-by experience because it can definitely cause harm.
I think, you know, it goes back to your initial point of talking about these being legitimate businesses. And these folks that are doing this, they're professionals. They're not just guessing, they're studying and they're figuring out what works. And, you know, with the phishing emails and stuff, it goes beyond just what's in the links and the technical side of it to the psychological side. They know to send emails that sounds like it's coming from the CEO when it's urgent and CEO needs something right away, and that plays on people's fears and people trying to be helpful, and then they know how to manipulate you in any way possible because it's their job to beat you at this game. Well, it's not a game. But.
No, but that's exactly right, and I'll share with you, Dax, that they take it to one more degree. You know, if you think back to the Cold War and the Russian spies that would come into America and camp out, and they would learn about what's going on. They potentially would even get their family involved into the intelligence world of the United States. Well, they've adopted that same philosophy, and they actually go into communities and they embed bad guys into the community to find out who the C-suite is, find out who the business leaders are, to go to the bars, to hang out with them, to get to know them, and to know when they're gone on business trips. And so if a CEO is gone on a business trip, that's a great time to send an email to somebody inside the organization that says, hey, you know, I'm at this business trip and ... And then they get them hooked because the only person who would know that the CEO is on the business trip is the CEO if it looks that way. And so, or somebody within the business or family, obviously. And so it makes it look like it's very legitimate and seem and feel like it's legitimate, and people get tricked, and it happens.
So I wanted to share because I still think there are people out there that might listen or read this and go, yeah, I'm not stupid. It's not going to happen to me. So I was just reading that in 2019, there were 4.1 billion records that were breached in just the first half of 2019. So I don't see the full 2019, but there's only 7.7 billion people in the world. So there were basically more breaches in 2019 than there are people in the world.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to businesses, it says that there's 68%, or let's see, what was it? 68% of business leaders feel that cybersecurity risks are increasing. And there was another one. It was something like 70% of businesses aren't ready for a breach if one were to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it is, man, it scares the hell out of me. I mean, there are just so many different ways out there, and nobody out there should be thinking this can't happen to me, this can't happen to me, because they're just, like you said, there's businesses out there. There are just so many ways to make it happen.
Well, it's gotten to the point where the cyber threat attacks consume more than a third of the actual internet bandwidth that's being utilized. So if you put that into perspective, that would mean that if you're driving down the road and every third car that you pass has a drunk driver in it, and then hoping that you wouldn't get hit, it's the equivalent to that, because it's literally that prevalent on the internet now that it is everywhere. And if you think it's not going to happen to you, I guarantee you don't want to be in that circumstance. So I would just say, don't fool yourself. Don't tell yourself a story. It will happen to you if you don't take the right measures.
So what are some of those right measures that business owners can take, specifically when it comes to training their employees and making sure they're safe?
Yeah, great question. Well, I first and foremost, subscribe to a service that helps your employees to know what the attacks and the phishing emails look like, and there's several of them out there. Our preference is a product that's called KnowBe4, but there's others that do a great job as well. You integrate it in, and your employees actually go through a class, and then they can then we ask them to take a short quiz to make sure that they actually heard it, and then after that, we want to make sure that we're testing from time to time, and if people are consistently not learning or falling prey to those kinds of attacks and tricks, then we want to spend a little bit more time with them and help them to have a good appreciation for it. So first and foremost, it's definitely around training every employee. It's part of the onboarding process. Every year, every 6 months, people need to go through that training as a refresher, because the mechanisms, the way that they try to trick people changes. And so we want to make sure that everybody is aware of kind of the latest and greatest mechanisms that they're using to fool people in that environment. And then on the inside of the network, it's making sure that you've got a good, solid security solution in place. We talked about the drive-bys. Well, if you don't have an aggressive patch management policy inside your organization where you're dealing with those vulnerabilities often and always, then you're going to get infected through one of these drive-by mechanisms that Todd was talking about. So it's really easy to fall prey. It's really hard to make sure that your environment is safe. We've gotten to the point where there's about 7 vectors that we really have to focus on inside the organization to make sure that they're all solid, and training and patching is just part of the equation. It gets much more ingrained into the geek side of the house in order to make sure that the rest of the environment is properly protected. I would throw out another nugget that I would ask all organizations to do, and that's 2-factor authentication. Making sure that even on the local workstation, on the local email client, Office 365, that you're utilizing the 2-factor authentication capability. It makes a huge difference in your ability to fall prey to the phishing attacks.
Great topic. I think a lot of people will take this as a fear type of or hopefully they're leaving a little bit scared, but that's not the point. The point is to help people be prepared. And I think next time we should talk about the risk that IT companies face and how that risk can propagate down to clients, which is something that is probably not on any business owner's mind. But good stuff. So we'll post some information along with this episode on our blog and some other resources. Until next time, stay safe.
thank you for attending this podcast. We hope it has been informative and helped convey that at JMark, we are people first and technology second. To learn more and discover additional content relevant to your business, please visit us online at jmark.com or at LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You may also call us at 844-44-JMark. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again.